I never imagined that at 67 years old, I'd have to start my life over again. For 45 years, I believed I had a perfect marriage to Grayson, but a routine prenatal ultrasound changed everything forever. That day, when Dr. Larkin looked at me with panic-filled eyes and whispered, "Mrs. Whitney, I need to speak with you privately right away," I knew my world was about to crumble. What I discovered in his office left me breathless, but what I did afterward would surprise even those who thought they knew me well. My name is Judith Whitney, and this is the story of how I discovered that the baby my daughter-in-law Olivia was carrying wasn't my son Nolan's child, but my own husband's. Before I continue, let me warn you, what you're about to hear isn't just a story of betrayal, but of how a woman everyone underestimated, because of her age, became the architect of a revenge so cold and perfect that it left the guilty parties with nothing, while I reclaimed control of my life. Because what my husband and daughter-in-law never knew was that I wasn't the naive, manipulable grandmother they thought I was. And that mistake would cost them absolutely everything. Allow me to tell you how this story began. I was born into a prosperous family in Vermont. My father, Harrison Caldwell, owned a successful farm in the countryside and several properties in Burlington. From a young age, he taught me the value of hard work and dependence. "Judith," he would say, "a woman must know how to stand on her own 2 feet, no matter how wealthy her husband might be." Words that would ironically save my life decades later. I met Grayson Whitney when I was 22. He was handsome, ambitious, and silver-tongued. He promised me the world, and I, young and in love, believed every word. We married after 6 months of dating. My father, always prudent, called me into his study the night before the wedding. "Daughter," he said while signing some documents, "this is my wedding gift to you. The farm and 2 properties in Burlington will remain exclusively in your name." "But Dad," I protested, "Grayson and I will share everything." My father looked at me with eyes that seemed to see into the future. "I trust that will be the case. But promise me these documents will stay in your name only. If the love is true, this won't matter. And if it isn't, you'll have protection." I followed his advice without knowing that this decision would be my salvation almost half a century later. The early years with Grayson were good. We worked hard to expand the family business. We bought more land, invested in properties, and gradually built substantial wealth. At 25, I had my only son, Nolan, the light of my life. Grayson appeared to be a good father, though he was always too busy with important business to attend school events or spend quality time with Nolan. I compensated for his absence by being both mother and father. I managed the family finances, administered the properties, supervised the farm, and still found time to help Nolan with his homework and attend every hockey game. Despite my efforts, Grayson always took credit for our success at social gatherings. "My wife is a gem," he would say, embracing me in front of friends and partners. But I handle the business side of things. I smiled and remained silent, because that's how I was raised. Women of my generation learned not to contradict our husbands in public. However, my father had taught me well, while Grayson believed he had total control. I made sure that each new investment, each property acquired during our marriage, was properly documented. I didn't distrust my husband, but caution had always been my ally. Nolan grew up witnessing this model of marriage. Though I taught him the importance of respecting women and sharing responsibilities, I suppose he also learned a certain passivity by seeing how I allowed his father to make decisions without consulting me. When Nolan turned 35, he met Olivia at a company party. She was 28, beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious. She worked in the marketing department and had risen quickly through the ranks. Grayson was charmed by her from the first moment. "That girl is exactly what our son needs," he told me enthusiastically after meeting her. "She has drive, determination, and knows what she wants." I noticed something strange in his enthusiasm, but attributed it to his desire to see our son well established. After all, Nolan had only had casual relationships until then. Olivia and Nolan married a year later. I was happy to finally have a daughter, as I had always wanted more children but couldn't have them. I opened my heart and home to Olivia. I treated her like the daughter I never had. Mrs. Whitney, she would say with tears in her eyes, "You're like the mother I lost as a child. I can never thank you enough for accepting me into your family like this." During the first 3 years of their marriage, Olivia became my shadow. She asked for advice on everything, from cooking recipes to investment strategies. Happy to share my knowledge, I taught her everything I knew about managing family properties and even offered her a position in administration with a generous salary of $5,000. Grayson seemed increasingly pleased with our daughter-in-law. "How lucky Nolan is," he would constantly repeat. "Olivia is exactly what this family needed, new blood and fresh vision." When Olivia announced her pregnancy, I believed our family happiness was complete. Grayson cried with emotion, something he hadn't done even when our son was born. I started knitting clothes for my future grandchild and planning how we would adapt the farm to welcome a new family member. But then, small details began to disturb me. Grayson, who had always been discreet with his expenses, began making extravagant purchases. One day, I found in his jacket a receipt from an exclusive jewelry store for an emerald necklace worth $7. "It's a surprise for your birthday?" he explained when I confronted him. But my birthday had passed 3 months earlier, and I never received that necklace. Calls at strange hours became frequent. Grayson would leave the room to answer in whispers, and when I asked, they were always urgent business matters. Olivia began showing surprising knowledge about business decisions that Grayson and I had discussed in private. When I asked how she knew these things, she always had a vague explanation. "I think Nolan mentioned it, or maybe I heard it when you two were talking." But what really troubled me was when I accidentally walked into the living room and found Grayson and Olivia sitting too close on the couch, laughing while looking at something on her phone. They abruptly separated when they saw me. "Mrs. Whitney," said Olivia, quickly putting away her phone, "I was just showing Grayson a video from the ultrasound. The baby has grown so much." I smiled and pretended to believe her, but what I glimpsed wasn't a medical video, but a text conversation with red heart emojis. Despite these signs, I refused to accept what was happening before my eyes. I preferred to think I was exaggerating, that they were the imaginings of an older woman. After all, how could my husband of 45 years betray me with our only son's wife? But what Grayson and Olivia couldn't imagine was that the truth would soon come to light in the most unexpected way. And when that happened, they would discover that the grandmother they thought they were manipulating had a side they had never seen, a side that would not forgive such betrayal. The day that changed everything started like any other. It was Olivia's 7th month of pregnancy, time for a checkup with her obstetrician. Nolan was on a business trip to Chicago, so I offered to accompany her. "How kind of you, Judith," exclaimed Olivia with a smile. "I now recognize as fake. But you don't need to trouble yourself." "It's no trouble," I insisted. "I want to be present for every moment of my grandchild's development." She agreed with some resistance, and we left for Dr. Larkin's office, a prestigious obstetrician who had been caring for Olivia throughout her pregnancy. During the ultrasound, I noticed the doctor frowning as he looked at the screen. Suddenly, his expression completely changed. "Mrs. Whitney," he said with a tense voice, "could you join me in my office for a moment? I need to discuss something with you privately." Olivia, visibly alarmed. "What's happening, doctor? Is something wrong with my baby?" "No, Mrs. Olivia. Your baby is perfectly healthy," he reassured her. "I just need to review some details of the family medical history with your mother-in-law." Once in his office, Dr. Larkin closed the door and looked at me with a mixture of compassion and concern. "Mrs. Whitney," he began, "what I'm about to tell you is extremely delicate and confidential, but as a doctor, I have an ethical dilemma to resolve." My heart started racing. "What's happening, doctor?" "The baby your daughter-in-law is carrying is completely healthy, but there's something that doesn't add up." He cleared his throat. "According to the medical records, your son has O negative blood type." "That's correct," I confirmed. "Just like my father." The problem is that the baby clearly has a positive blood, which would be impossible if your son Nolan was the biological father. Genetically, a father with O negative blood cannot have a child with a positive blood, regardless of the mother's blood type. I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. Are you sure? Completely, he affirmed. Additionally, there's another important detail. According to my calculations and the fetal measurements, conception occurred during the first week of February. Was your son in town during that time? A chill ran down my spine. No, I replied in a barely audible voice. Nolan was in Boston all February for a project launch. He didn't return until early March. The doctor nodded gravely. There's one more thing I should mention. I clearly remember treating your husband, Mr. Whitney, for a back injury in early February, exactly when this baby was conceived. In that moment, all the pieces fit together with brutal clarity. The strange calls, the complicity, the expensive gifts, Grayson's excessive enthusiasm about the pregnancy, everything took on a terrible meaning. Mrs. Whitney, continued Dr. Larkin, normally this isn't something I would discuss, but I've known your family for years. Your son deserves to know the truth, and you deserve to be prepared for what's coming. I remained motionless, processing the devastating information. My husband of 45 years had not only cheated on me, but had done so with our only son's wife, and now she was expecting a baby that was actually my grandchild and my son's brother simultaneously. What do you plan to do? Asked the doctor after a long silence. I breathed deeply, straightened my back, and felt an unusual coldness replace the initial shock. For now, nothing, I responded with a calmness that surprised even myself. I need time to think and plan my next move. I understand, he said, but don't wait too long. These situations only get worse with time. I left his office with a perfectly practiced smile. Olivia looked at me questioningly as I approached. Is everything okay, Judith? She asked with feigned concern. Perfectly, I assured her. The doctor just wanted to ask me about some family allergies to be prepared when the baby is born. As we returned home, I observed Olivia with new eyes. This woman, whom I had treated as a daughter, whom I had welcomed into my home and heart, had destroyed our family out of ambition, because I now understood that this wasn't about love, but money. She and Grayson believed they could use this baby to secure their claim on my fortune. What they didn't know was that they had chosen the wrong victim. Because I, Judith Whitney, wasn't the defenseless and manipulable grandmother they thought. And very soon, they would discover exactly who they were dealing with. I didn't return home that day. I told Olivia I had an important meeting with the farm managers and that I'd be home late. But instead, I went to the Langham, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. I needed space to think, to process my pain, and more importantly, to start planning. In the hotel suite, I collapsed for the first and last time. I cried for hours, releasing 45 years of betrayed trust. When the tears finally dried, I felt that something inside me had also dried up. My naivety, my tolerance, my willingness to be trampled on. The next day, I contacted Vincent Murray, a former police detective who now worked privately. I had met him years earlier when he helped us with a security issue at the farm. Mrs. Whitney, he greeted me respectfully when we met in a discreet cafe. How can I be of service? I explained my situation without tears or drama. Vincent listened attentively, occasionally taking notes. I need solid evidence, I concluded. Photos, recordings, financial records. Anything that demonstrates the relationship between my husband and my daughter-in-law, as well as any plans they have to take my assets. I understand perfectly, nodded Vincent. How long have you been suspicious? I've noticed signs for months, but I confirmed my suspicions yesterday, I responded. But I believe this has been going on for at least a year. Vincent looked at me professionally, but I could see compassion in his eyes. Mrs. Whitney, are you sure you want to proceed? Sometimes what we discover can be even more painful than the suspicion. I straightened my back. I'm beyond pain, Vincent. Now I only seek justice. Over the next 2 weeks, I maintained a facade of absolute normality. Each morning I prepared breakfast for Grayson and Olivia, as I always had. I smiled during family dinners while they exchanged glances they thought were discreet. I even organized an elaborate baby shower for Olivia, inviting the whole family and close friends. "Judith," Grayson told me during the party, "I've never seen you so enthusiastic. You look rejuvenated." I smiled, savoring the irony of his words. "That's because I have so much to be grateful for, Grayson, more than you can imagine." Meanwhile, Vincent did his job with meticulous efficiency. Every 2 days I received detailed reports in an encrypted email. What I discovered confirmed my worst suspicions and revealed others I hadn't even imagined. Grayson and Olivia saw each other 3 times a week in an apartment he had secretly purchased in downtown Burlington, using funds from our joint accounts. They had been in a relationship since before she met Nolan, and had deliberately planned for her to seduce our son to enter the family. But most devastating was discovering they had a specific plan to get their hands on my fortune. Vincent had managed to record one of their conversations in the apartment. "When the baby is born," Grayson said in the recording, "Judith will be so excited about her grandchild that she'll sign any document we put in front of her. I've already talked to Parker to prepare the property transfers." "What if she suspects something?" asked Olivia. "Judith? Please. She's too naive, too traditional. She believes everything I tell her. Besides, she's so grateful to have a daughter-in-law who treats her well, that she'd do anything for you." Hearing those words provoked a cold and calculated anger in me. They weren't just betraying me in the vilest way, they were mocking me, considering me a foolish old woman they could manipulate. What Grayson never understood, during all our years together, was that my apparent submission was a choice, not a weakness. I had chosen to keep the peace, had chosen not to confront him when he came home late smelling of different perfume, had chosen to ignore his small lies to keep the family together for Nolan's sake. But no more. That compliant and silent Judith had died in Dr. Larkin's office. The woman who emerged was very different. A week later, I received a complete financial report from Vincent. Grayson hadn't just bought the apartment for their encounters, but had been systematically diverting money from our joint accounts to a secret account in his and Olivia's names. So far, they had accumulated almost 200. "They're preparing their future together," Vincent explained. As we reviewed the documents in the hotel suite, "They've been consulting with real estate agencies in Naples, Florida. It seems they're planning to move there after getting your money." "And my son?" I asked, though I already imagined the answer. "From what I've been able to gather, they plan to tell Mr. Nolan that the baby needs a warmer climate for respiratory problems. Convince him to temporarily separate from Olivia so she can be in Florida with the baby while he manages the business here. Eventually, I suppose they plan to divorce." The coldness with which they had planned to destroy my son infuriated me even more than their betrayal of me. Nolan didn't deserve this. He had been a devoted husband, a hard worker, who adored Olivia, and was excited about becoming a father. "Vincent," I said after a long silence, "there's something else I need you to investigate." I explained my plan in detail. Vincent listened attentively, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he looked at me with something akin to admiration. "Mrs. Whitney, if I may say so, you're an extraordinary woman." "No, Vincent," I corrected. "I'm a woman who has finally decided to value herself." That evening, while having dinner with Grayson at home, he asked why I had been so absent lately. "You seem worried, Judith," he commented while enjoying the pot roast I had prepared. "Is something bothering you?" I looked at him, amazed by his ability to feign concern while planning to destroy me. "I'm just thinking about the future, Grayson," I replied softly. "About how everything will change when the baby is born." "Ah, yes," he smiled, not knowing that I knew the true reason for his enthusiasm. "It will be a new chapter for all of us." "It certainly will be," I confirmed. "In fact, I've been thinking that we should update our legal documents. Wills, trusts, property titles. I want to make sure everything is in order for the next generation. I saw his eyes light up with barely disguised greed. That seems like an excellent idea, he responded too quickly. In fact, I've been thinking the same thing. I could contact Parker tomorrow. That won't be necessary, I said casually. I've already scheduled a meeting with Blackwell and Associates for next week. I thought it would be good to get a fresh opinion. For an instant, I saw panic in his eyes. Parker was his accomplice, a mediocre lawyer who would do anything for money. Blackwell and Associates, on the other hand, had an impeccable reputation for honesty. As you prefer, dear, he finally conceded, struggling to maintain his composure. Over the following days, I continued planting small seeds of my plan. I casually mentioned to Olivia that I was considering putting some properties in the baby's name to avoid inheritance complications in the future. I commented to Grayson that perhaps we should consider transferring the farm to Nolan before inheritance taxes become more complicated. Each suggestion was received with barely contained enthusiasm. They believed they were manipulating me, not knowing that each enthusiastic response was further proof of their betrayal. But there was a crucial element in my plan that was still missing. I needed to talk to Nolan. My son deserved to know the truth, and I needed his support for what I was about to do. I called him on a Friday afternoon, when I knew he would be finishing his work week. Son, I said with studied calmness, I need to see you this weekend. It's important that we talk privately without Olivia or your father. Mom? Is everything okay? He asked, immediately catching the seriousness in my voice. No, son, I answered honestly. But it will be after we talk. I'll meet you tomorrow at the Langham, Suite 512. Don't mention to anyone where you'll be. The confusion in his voice was evident, but he trusted me enough not to ask more questions. I'll be there, Mom. That night, I hardly slept, preparing myself for the most difficult conversation I would ever have with my son. How do you tell your only son that his wife hasn't just betrayed him with his own father, but that the baby they're so eagerly awaiting is actually his brother? Nolan arrived promptly at the hotel suite the next day. He hugged me with evident concern. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? Why are we meeting here instead of at home? I invited him to sit down and took a deep breath. Nolan, what I'm about to tell you will be extremely painful, but I need you to listen completely before reacting. His eyes widened with alarm as I began to relate everything. The initial suspicions, Dr. Larkin's revelation, Vincent's investigation, the recordings, the financial plans, everything. As I spoke, I saw his face go from disbelief to shock, and finally to a pain so deep it broke my heart. When I finished, he remained silent for several minutes. Then, with a broken voice, he asked, Are you sure, Mom? Absolutely sure. In response, I played some of the recordings Vincent had obtained. Hearing the voices of Olivia and Grayson discussing their plans, mocking Nolan and me, was the definitive confirmation. My son stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to us, while struggling to control his emotions. When he finally turned around, I saw something new in his eyes, a determination I had never noticed before. What are we going to do about it? He asked with a firm voice. I have a plan, I replied, but I need to know if you're with me. It will be difficult, and we'll have to act with perfect control over the next few weeks. I'm with you, Mom, he affirmed without hesitation. They didn't just betray me, they betrayed us both. They deserved to lose everything. I proceeded to explain my plan in detail. Nolan listened attentively, occasionally nodding and suggesting adjustments when necessary. Do you think it will work? He asked when I finished. It will work, I assured him with conviction, because they made a fundamental mistake. They underestimated the grandmother they thought they could manipulate. That night, as I returned home, I felt a strange sense of peace. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else. The certainty that justice would soon be served. What Grayson and Olivia couldn't imagine was that in less than a month, their elaborate castle of lies would completely crumble. And when the dust settled, they would discover that they had absolutely nothing left. Over the next 2 weeks, Nolan and I executed our plan with precise coordination. He returned home and acted normally, pretending to know nothing about the betrayal. He even increased his displays of affection toward Olivia and his enthusiasm for the baby, which clearly disconcerted her. "You seem different," she commented to him one night during a family dinner. "More attentive, more affectionate." "That's because every day I realize more how fortunate I am," responded Nolan, looking at her fixedly. "I have a beautiful wife who's expecting my child. What more could I ask for?" I saw Olivia pale slightly before forcing a smile. "You're so sweet, honey." Grayson, meanwhile, grew increasingly confident. He believed his plan was working perfectly. I had mentioned several times my intention to transfer some properties to the baby's name, and he interpreted this as a sign of my naivety. "Judith," he said to me one morning during breakfast, "I've been thinking about your idea of updating our legal documents. I think we should also consider putting the farm in Nolan and Olivia's names. After all, they'll be the ones managing it in the future." "That's an excellent idea," I replied with false enthusiasm. "In fact, I've already spoken with Blackwell about that. They've suggested a family meeting to discuss all the details together." "A family meeting?" he asked, slightly alarmed. "Yes, dear. You, me, Nolan, Olivia, and the lawyers. After all, we're talking about the future of our family." Grayson nodded, though I could see the tension in his jaw. A meeting with everyone present wasn't what he had planned. He wanted to handle me alone, without witnesses who might question the documents he intended to make me sign. Meanwhile, Vincent continued gathering evidence. He discovered that Grayson had contacted 3 different real estate agencies in Naples and had made a deposit to secure a beachfront condo. He had also begun transferring small amounts from our joint accounts to his secret account more frequently, preparing for his new life. What impacted me most was discovering they had already planned their strategy for after the baby's birth. Grayson intended to ask me to sign property transfer documents with the excuse of protecting the baby from future taxes. These documents would actually transfer effective control of my properties to him and Olivia as administrators of the baby's inheritance. Vincent also discovered something that proved fundamental. Grayson had never reviewed our original property documents. He assumed everything was in both our names, as I had led him to believe for decades. "Your husband never verified the public records," Vincent informed me. "He simply assumed he has rights to all the properties by being your husband." This information confirmed what I already suspected. Grayson had become so arrogant, so sure of his control over me, that he had never bothered to verify the facts. That arrogance would be his downfall. As the day of our family meeting approached, I intensified my preparations. I consulted with the best lawyers in the city, ensuring that every document was perfectly in order. I reviewed every property, every bank account, every investment, making sure everything was correctly registered. What I discovered gave me immense peace of mind. My father had been even more foresighted than I imagined. Not only had he put the original farm and the 2 properties in Burlington solely in my name, but he had included a specific clause in the property documents. Any assets acquired with income derived from these original properties would also belong exclusively to me, unless I specifically indicated otherwise. For 45 years, I had allowed Grayson to believe that he controlled our real estate empire, when in reality, legally, everything belonged to me. 2 days before the scheduled meeting, Vincent brought me one final piece of evidence, a note written by Olivia that he had found in the secret apartment. It said, "Darling, just 2 more months, and we'll be free. When the old fool signs the papers and transfers everything to the baby's name, we can take full control. I'm tired of pretending I care about her, of listening to her old-fashioned advice and pretending it matters to me. I can't wait to see her face when she discovers that idiot Nolan isn't the father of my child. By then it will be too late, she'll have nothing left." Reading those words, written by the woman I had treated as a daughter, produced a cold and controlled anger within me. There was no longer room for doubt or compassion. "Grayson, and Olivia had declared war on our family. And I was prepared to respond with all my strength. The day of the meeting dawned sunny and clear, as if the universe itself approved of what I was about to do. I had carefully chosen the private dining room at the Burlington Club for our encounter. It was a discreet place where the city's wealthy families handled their most delicate affairs without fear of indiscretion. I dressed with special care that morning, choosing a navy blue Chanel suit that my father had given me years ago. Navy blue inspires confidence and authority, he had told me. Today I would need both qualities in abundance. Grayson looked at me with approval when I emerged from my dressing room. "You look very elegant, Judith. Almost like in our youth?" I smiled, letting him believe the compliment had affected me. "Thank you, dear. It's an important day for our family." I wanted to look presentable. We arrived at the club at the agreed time. Attorney Blackwell was already waiting for us, along with her assistant, who carried a briefcase full of documents. Nolan arrived shortly after with Olivia, who looked radiant in her maternity dress, though I noticed tension in her eyes when she saw me. "Mother-in-law," she exclaimed, hugging me effusively. "How elegant you look today. It almost seems like we're going to a celebration instead of a boring legal meeting." "In a way, it is a celebration, dear," I replied, returning her embrace. "The beginning of a new chapter for all of us." Vincent arrived last, introducing himself as my personal financial advisor. I saw Grayson frown, clearly annoyed by the presence of someone he hadn't anticipated. We sat around the private table. Attorney Blackwell began formally. "Good morning, everyone. We're here to discuss the restructuring of the Whitney Caldwell family assets, as requested by Mrs. Judith. Before proceeding with any signatures, I'd like to briefly review the current status of the properties in question." Grayson leaned forward, evidently anxious to get to the part where I would sign the documents that he believed would transfer everything to his control. The attorney displayed several official documents on the table. According to public records, the farm in Vermont, currently valued at $3 million, is registered exclusively in the name of Judith Caldwell Whitney. I saw Grayson blink in confusion. There must be a mistake. We've managed that farm together for 45 years. Managed, yes, the attorney gently corrected. But the legal ownership has always belonged exclusively to Mrs. Judith by direct inheritance from her father, Mr. Harrison Caldwell. Before Grayson could protest, the attorney continued. The same applies to the two original properties in Burlington, currently valued at $2.5 million each, and to the commercial complexes in Manchester, valued at $4.5 million in total. Grayson's face lost color with each property mentioned. "This is impossible," he muttered, more to himself than to us. "Most interesting," continued the relentless attorney, "is the special clause that Mr. Caldwell included in the original documents. Any property acquired with income derived from these original assets also belongs exclusively to Mrs. Judith, unless she specifically indicated otherwise on the purchase documents." Grayson looked at me, completely pale. "Judith, did you know about this?" I smiled calmly. "Of course, Grayson. My father explained everything to me before our wedding. I simply never saw the need to mention it. After all, we were a team, weren't we?" Olivia, who had been listening with growing alarm, intervened with a trembling voice. "But this doesn't change our plans for the baby, does it, Judith? You mentioned you wanted to put some properties in his name." "Ah, yes, about that," I responded, signaling to Vincent, who immediately distributed folders to everyone present. "Before we talk about the future, I think we should clarify some things about the present." Grayson opened his folder and I saw all blood drain from his face. Inside were photographs of him and Olivia entering the secret apartment, embracing, kissing. There were also account statements showing the systematic transfers of money to their joint account. Olivia let out a small cry when she saw the contents of her folder. "What does this mean?" demanded Grayson, though his voice betrayed him. He knew exactly what it meant. "It means, dear husband," I responded with glacial calmness, "that I am perfectly aware of your relationship with our daughter-in-law. I know that the baby she's expecting isn't Nolan's, but yours, And I know you've been planning to get my fortune once the baby is born. Nolan, who had maintained admirable composure until that moment, stood up and threw Olivia's note onto the table. How could you? He asked with a broken voice. You? He looked at his father. My own father. And you? He turned to Olivia, whom I loved with all my soul. Olivia began to cry. Big theatrical tears that once would have moved me. Nolan, I can explain. It was all your father's idea. He seduced me, manipulated me. Enough, I interrupted. We have recordings of your conversations. We know this began even before you met Nolan. It was a calculated plan from the beginning. Grayson, regaining some composure, tried to take control of the situation. Judith, we can talk about this in private. There's no need to make a spectacle in front of strangers. Strangers? I repeated. Attorney Blackwell is no stranger. She's a public official who's here to witness what will happen next. I turned to her. Can we proceed with the documents we prepared? The attorney nodded and extracted a new set of papers from her briefcase. These are the divorce documents, prepared according to Mrs. Judith's instructions, citing proven adultery as the main cause. She slid them toward Grayson, who looked at them as if they were venomous snakes. I won't sign this, he declared. Of course you will, I responded with certainty. Unless you prefer that I present all this evidence in a public trial. Imagine the headlines: renowned businessman cheats on his wife of 45 years with his own son's wife. How would that affect your business, Grayson? How many partners would want to continue working with a man who betrays his own family like this? The attorney continued. The agreement establishes that Mr. Whitney will renounce any claim on the family properties, recognizing that legally they were never his. In exchange, Mrs. Judith will allow him to keep his personal accounts and a condominium on Maple Street so he can rebuild his life. A condo? Exclaimed Grayson, indignant. We've built an empire together, and you offer me a miserable condo? No, Grayson, I firmly corrected. I inherited assets and multiplied them while you took credit and apparently enjoyed other distractions. The condo is more generous than you deserve. I turned to Olivia, who had stopped crying and now looked with horror at the documents in front of her. As for you, Olivia, Nolan's divorce papers are already prepared. You'll receive a one-time compensation of $50,000 so you can support yourself until the baby is born. After that, you'll have to make your own way, just like I did at your age. And my baby? She asked with a trembling voice. Your baby is technically my grandchild, despite the deplorable circumstances, I replied. We'll establish a trust fund for his education and basic needs. The money will go directly to those expenses, not to you or Grayson. Grayson hit the table furiously. You can't do this. You can't take everything from us. Vincent, who had remained silent until that moment, intervened. Mr. Whitney, I remind you that technically she isn't taking anything away, because legally, it was never yours. Additionally, the evidence of financial fraud we've gathered would be sufficient for a criminal complaint. Whitney is being extremely generous by not pressing charges. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. Grayson alternated between threats, pleas, and promises to change. Olivia cried, got angry, tried to manipulate Nolan by appealing to his feelings for the baby, but in the end, faced with irrefutable evidence and the firmness of our position, they had no choice but to sign. When the last document was signed and the attorney left with her assistant, the 5 of us remained in a silence charged with emotions. Finally, I stood up. Grayson, you have 3 days to collect your personal belongings from the house. Vincent will supervise to ensure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. Olivia, you can stay in the Burlington apartment until the baby is born, but after that, you must leave it. Nolan, who had maintained admirable dignity throughout the entire process, also stood. Dad, he said with a controlled voice, despite everything, you're still my biological father, and that baby will be my brother. Someday, perhaps, I might forgive you, but today is not that day. Grayson seemed to have aged 10 years in those few hours. Nolan, son. Don't call me son, Nolan interrupted. A real father would never have done what you did. We left the restaurant, leaving Grayson and Olivia sitting in silence, defeated and alone with the consequences of their actions. As we crossed the threshold, I felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in 45 years, I truly breathed freely. In the car, Nolan finally allowed himself to crumble. I hugged him while he cried, releasing the pain of betrayal. I'm so sorry, son, I murmured, stroking his hair as when he was a child. No, Mom, he responded through tears. I'm sorry. I should have noticed. Should have protected you better. It wasn't your responsibility to protect me, I assured him. But from now on, we'll protect each other. The days and weeks that followed were ones of adjustment and healing. Grayson moved to the Maple Street condo, while Olivia remained in Burlington until the delivery. The baby, a boy, was born 2 weeks after our confrontation. Despite the circumstances, I couldn't help feeling something for him when I saw him. After all, he was innocent of his parents' sins. Nolan, showing a maturity that surprised me, decided to maintain contact with his half-brother. It's not his fault how he came into the world, he reasoned. And technically, he's still my family. A month after the birth, Olivia moved to Portland with the baby. According to Vincent, she had found work at an advertising agency and was starting anew. Grayson, for his part, tried to contact me several times during the first few months. Judith, he said in one of his messages, I know what I did is unforgivable, but 45 years together must mean something. I miss you. The house is empty without you. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. 6 months after that day at the restaurant, my life had changed completely. The farm, which I had always loved, became my sanctuary. I hired a new team of managers for the properties, with Nolan at the helm. Together, we restructured the family business and made it even more prosperous. Nolan eventually began to heal. He met Dakota, an architect who worked on renovating one of our buildings. Their relationship progressed slowly, with the natural caution of someone who has been deeply hurt, but I watched as he gradually reopened himself to the possibility of love. A year after our separation, I received a letter from Grayson. It contained no pleas or justifications, just a sincere apology and acknowledgement that he had destroyed the best thing he had in life through greed and lust. He mentioned he was in therapy, trying to understand his own actions. He didn't ask for forgiveness, recognizing that some wounds are too deep to heal. I kept the letter but never replied. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Most surprising to me was discovering how much life I had left to live. At 67, when many think the time for new experiences has passed, I found a freedom I had never known. I began to travel, visiting places I had always dreamed of seeing, but that Grayson had always postponed. Florence, Paris, Tokyo, New York, the world opened before me like a book of infinite possibilities. I returned to college and completed that art history degree I had abandoned when I got married. I joined boards of charitable organizations, contributing my business experience to causes that mattered to me. And most importantly, I learned to value myself. After decades of living in the shadow of a man who didn't respect me, I discovered that my worth didn't depend on his approval or my status as his wife. I was valuable in my own right, for my intelligence, my resilience, my capacity to love unconditionally, and my strength to do what was right, even when it was painful. One day, as I was having breakfast on the farm's terrace, Nolan joined me with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. Mom, he said, taking my hand, Dakota and I are getting married. The joy I felt was incomparable. Oh, son, I'm so happy for you. For us, he corrected, because this time, we made sure to choose well. Dakota loves me for who I am, not for what I have, and I love her for her genuine heart. You know what's most ironic? I commented as I poured more coffee. Grayson and Olivia planned all this to get my fortune, but in the end, they lost the only things that really matter: authentic love, family, inner peace, all those things that money can't buy. Nolan nodded thoughtfully. Do you ever regret how we handled the situation? Exposing everything in that meeting? I reflected for a moment before answering. No. I could have chosen public revenge, scandal, completely destroying their reputations. But we chose private justice, allowing them to retain their basic dignity while reclaiming what was ours. That was the right decision. 2 years after that fateful ultrasound, I received an unexpected invitation. Olivia wanted to see me. The little one, now a 2-year-old boy named Mason, needed a grandmother figure in his life, she explained in her letter. She had reflected deeply on her actions and wanted to apologize in person. I agreed to meet her at a neutral cafe. When I arrived, Olivia was waiting with little Mason, a bright-eyed boy who remarkably resembled Nolan at that age, a reminder of the blood connection they shared. Our conversation was honest and painful. Olivia had changed. Life as a working single mother had transformed her. She was no longer the calculating and ambitious young woman willing to destroy a family for money. She had learned the value of hard work and integrity the hard way. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mrs. Whitney, she said with humility. What I did was unforgivable. But Mason is innocent, and he deserves to know his grandmother. I looked at the little boy, who was happily playing with a toy car. He wasn't guilty of the circumstances of his birth. I can't forget what happened, I responded honestly. But neither can I deny that this child is part of my family. For his sake, we can try to build a cordial relationship. Over time, that cordial relationship evolved. Olivia demonstrated with actions, not just words, that she had changed. She worked honestly, took good care of Mason, and never tried to take advantage of our renewed connection. Mason grew up knowing he had a complicated family, but one that loved him. Nolan assumed the role of big brother, not father, and they both developed a special bond. Grayson, for his part, maintained a distant but consistent relationship with his biological son, perhaps trying not to repeat the mistakes he had made with Nolan. As for me, at 70 I discovered that life can offer wonderful surprises when you least expect them. During a trip to Rome, I met Arthur, an American widower who ran a small art gallery there. What began as conversations about Caravaggio and Bernini became something deeper. It wasn't teenage romantic love, but a mature companionship based on mutual respect, shared interests, and the wisdom that only comes with years. When Nolan saw how happy Arthur made me, he encouraged me to follow my heart. "Mom," he said, "you deserve this happiness after everything you've been through." Today, at 72, I divide my time between Vermont and Rome. The farm remains my primary home, but I enjoy spending seasons in Arthur's apartment, overlooking the Roman Forum. I never remarried. After 45 years with Grayson, I valued my independence too much. But I found a companion who respects that, who loves me for who I am, and not for what I possess. Grayson, and Olivia's betrayal, so painful at the time, turned out to be the catalyst for a life I had never dared to imagine. It freed me from chains I didn't even know I carried. It allowed me to discover my own strength, my own worth. If there's one thing I've learned from this entire experience, it's that it's never too late to start again. You're never too old to demand respect, to seek happiness on your own terms. To the women reading this, especially those who have dedicated their lives to their families, I say, don't let anyone make you feel invisible. Don't let your age become an excuse for being mistreated or underestimated. Your value doesn't diminish with the years. On the contrary, the wisdom and experience you've accumulated are invaluable treasures. And always remember, true wealth isn't in properties or money, but in the ability to look in the mirror each morning and feel proud of the person looking back at you. Because in the end, as my ex-husband discovered the hard way, there's no fortune in the world that can buy the peace that comes from living with integrity and true love. And so, What began as the most painful betrayal imaginable became the unexpected gift of an authentic life. A life that, despite beginning in its final act, turned out to be richer and more fulfilling than I could ever have dreamed possible.